The whisper of opportunity drifted across Ordway, Colorado like tumbleweeds on a dusty afternoon. But for Nora Newman, those whispers had become a deafening call she could no longer ignore. The year was 1878, and at 22, she stood before the town's only bookshop with determination etched across her face and a rejected manuscript clutched tightly against her chest. "Miss Newman, I cannot sell stories about female doctors and lawyers," Mr. Hargrove, the elderly bookshop owner, said with a dismissive wave. "It's simply not decent. Perhaps something about a woman finding a good husband would be more appropriate." Nora forced herself to maintain composure despite the familiar sting of rejection. "With all due respect, Mr. Hargrove, my stories aren't about women abandoning their proper places. They're about women finding their proper places wherever their talents lead them." And that's precisely the problem. He handed back her carefully bound pages. "Such notions are dangerous, especially for impressionable young minds. Women doctors, women lawyers, might as well write about flying pigs." The bell above the door jingled, but Nora was too focused on retrieving her manuscript to notice the tall figure who entered. She smoothed her hand over the title page where she'd meticulously written "Beyond Boundaries" in her finest penmanship. "I'll have you know, sir," she said, unable to keep the tremor from her voice, "that there are already female physicians graduating from medical colleges back east. The world is changing. Not in Ordway, it isn't." Mr. Hargrove folded his arms. "And I suggest you stop filling your head with such nonsense before you become unmarriageable. 22 is already pushing spinsterhood." The stranger who had entered during their exchange cleared his throat. "Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing. Is there a problem with a story about a female doctor?" Nora turned to find herself face to face with a man she'd seen around town, but never spoken to, tall with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. She recognized him as one of the newcomers who had arrived last spring, a rancher who kept mostly to himself. "The Griffith Ranch," she recalled. "Mr. Griffith, is it?" Hargrove greeted him. "No problem at all. Miss Newman here simply has some unrealistic notions about what constitutes appropriate literature." "Thomas Griffith," the man introduced himself, tipping his hat to Nora. "And I'd be interested to know what makes stories about female doctors inappropriate." Nora blinked in surprise. Most men in town shared Hargrove's views. "It's unnatural," Hargrove stated flatly. "Fills women's heads with improper ambitions." Thomas's eyebrows rose. "My mother was treated by a female doctor in Boston, saved her life when all the male doctors had given up." "Nothing seemed unnatural about it except perhaps how the other doctors treated her," Hargrove sputtered. "Well, that's the East. Things are different here." "Are they?" Thomas asked, his gaze landing on Nora's manuscript. "May I?" Hesitantly, she handed him her precious pages. He carefully opened to the first page and read the opening paragraph, his eyes moving quickly across her handwriting. "This is good," he said after a moment, genuine appreciation in his voice. "You have real talent, Miss Newman. Nora Newman, Miss Newman." He returned her manuscript with a care that suggested he understood its value to her. "I'd like to read the rest sometime if you'd permit it," Hargrove harumphed. "You're encouraging dangerous foolishness, Griffith." Thomas shrugged. "I'm encouraging good writing. The world needs more of that." He turned to Nora. "Don't let small minds contain big dreams, Miss Newman." Heat rushed to Nora's cheeks. No one in Ordway had ever spoken about her writing with such respect. "Thank you, Mr. Griffith." "Thomas," he corrected with an easy smile that transformed his serious face. "And I meant what I said about reading the rest." Nora clutched her manuscript tighter, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected ally. "I should be going. My father will be expecting me home. As she turned to leave, Thomas gently touched her elbow. "Miss Newman, Nora, don't give up. The right audience will find your words one day." Outside on the wooden sidewalk, Nora took a deep breath of the late spring air. Thomas Griffith's words echoed in her mind as she made her way through the dusty streets toward her family's modest home. The right audience. The problem was, that audience clearly didn't exist in Ordway. When she reached home, her father was at the dining table with papers spread before him, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Samuel Newman looked up with a furrowed brow. "How did it go at Hargrove's?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer, the same as always. Nora set her manuscript on a side table and removed her hat. "He said my stories are dangerous and unmarriageable." Her father sighed. "Nora, I support your writing. You know I do. But perhaps Hargrove has a point about the subject matter." "Papa, not you too." Disappointment settled heavy in her chest. "I only mean that perhaps you could write something more acceptable to local tastes, at least to start with." Nora shook her head. "I can only write what's in my heart. And what's in my heart isn't stories about women finding husbands. It's about women finding themselves." Samuel removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I met a man who knew your mother at university. Did I ever tell you that?" "No." Nora sat down across from him, curious. Her mother had died when she was only 5, leaving behind few memories and many questions. "He said she was brilliant, could have been anything she wanted, but she chose to be my wife and your mother, and she never regretted it." "I'm not saying she should have," Nora said gently. "I'm just saying some women might choose differently, and their stories deserve to be told too." Samuel looked at her with sad eyes. "You're so much like her, that same fire. Sometimes I worry." "About what, Papa? That Ordway will extinguish it. Or worse, that you'll leave to find somewhere that won't." Nora reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "I love you, Papa, and I love our home. I just wish that people's minds were as big as your dreams." He smiled faintly. "I understand more than you think." That evening, Nora couldn't sleep. Her encounter with Thomas Griffith replayed in her mind. It wasn't just his support of her writing, but the look in his eyes as if he truly saw her, not as a woman with inappropriate ambitions, but as a person with valid dreams. The next morning, she was hanging laundry in the yard when she spotted a familiar figure approaching on horseback. Her heart quickened as Thomas Griffith dismounted and tied his horse to the fence post. "Miss Newman," he called, removing his hat. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Mr. Griffith." She smoothed her apron, suddenly conscious of her work clothes and wind-blown hair. "I was wondering if you had reconsidered my offer to read your manuscript." He approached with an easy confidence that wasn't arrogance but comfort in his own skin. "And please, I meant it about calling me Thomas." "Only if you call me Nora," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "And I'm not certain, it's rather personal." "I understand." He didn't press. Instead, he glanced at the clothesline. "Would you like some help?" "My mother taught me to hang laundry properly, said no woman should marry a man who couldn't help with household tasks." Nora laughed. "Your mother sounds like someone I would have liked to know." "You remind me of her," he said, taking a damp sheet from the basket. "She was always reading, always questioning. My father adored that about her." As they worked side by side, Thomas told her about growing up in Pennsylvania, his parents' progressive ideas, and his decision to come west after their passing. "Why Ordway?" she asked. "It's hardly the most forward-thinking community. The land was affordable, and I had a notion about starting fresh somewhere different." He pinned a pillowcase to the line with surprising dexterity. "Though I admit, I'm finding the narrow viewpoints challenging. Especially after meeting someone with ideas worth hearing." Nora blushed. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His gray eyes held hers. "I know you write stories that make men like Hargrove uncomfortable, which suggests they're worth reading. I know you speak your mind even when it's unpopular. And I know you hang laundry with the same determination you defend your work." A laugh escaped her. "Is that a compliment?" "The highest." He grinned. "So, will you let me read your manuscript? I promise an honest opinion, not a judgment on whether it's proper." Something in his earnestness broke down her hesitation. "Yes, but on one condition." "Name it. You have to tell me why you really care about my writing." Thomas's smile faded into something more serious. "Because I've seen what happens when people are told their dreams don't fit the world around them. My mother was brilliant, as I said, but she was also unhappy in ways my father never fully understood. She loved us, but she mourned the life she might have had if the world were different." He looked away, toward the open plains beyond the town. "I believe the world changes when brave people refuse to confine themselves to others' expectations." Nora felt something shift inside her, a recognition of kindred spirit. "Wait here," she said, and hurried inside to retrieve her manuscript. When she returned and handed it to him, their fingers brushed. The simple contact sent warmth spreading up her arm. "I'll take good care of it," he promised, carefully tucking it into his saddlebag. "And I'll return it tomorrow with my thoughts if that's acceptable." "It is." She couldn't contain her smile. "Thank you, Thomas." As he mounted his horse, he looked down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Don't let them diminish you, Nora. Your dreams matter." She watched him ride away, her heart thundering with something she couldn't quite name: fear, perhaps, at having shared her most private thoughts, or excitement at having found someone who wanted to hear them. The next day passed in anxious anticipation. Nora found herself checking the window more often than necessary, starting at every sound of approaching hoofbeats. By afternoon, she had convinced herself that Thomas had read her work and found it lacking, that his initial enthusiasm had been politeness rather than genuine interest. When he finally appeared, the sun was already beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the yard. She met him at the gate, unable to decipher his expression. "I'm sorry for the delay," he said, dismounting. "I couldn't stop reading, and then I had ranch matters to attend to." "You couldn't stop reading?" Thomas reached into his saddlebag and retrieved her manuscript, now accompanied by several pages of notes. "Nora, this is remarkable. Your characters have such depth, such humanity. The female doctor isn't just fighting for her right to practice medicine, she's fighting for her patients, for her community." Relief and joy surged through her. "You truly liked it." "I more than liked it. I think it deserves to be published." He handed her the manuscript along with his notes. "I've made some suggestions, but they're just that, suggestions. The heart of your story is perfect as it is." Nora scanned his neat handwriting, marveling at the thoughtfulness of his comments. He hadn't just read her work, he'd engaged with it, understood it. "Would you walk with me?" he asked suddenly. "There's something I'd like to discuss." Curious, Nora called to her father that she was going for a walk, then joined Thomas on the road that led toward the outskirts of town. "I have a friend in Denver," Thomas said as they walked. "He works for a newspaper that publishes stories as serials before they become books. He's always looking for fresh voices." Nora stopped walking. "Are you suggesting that you submit your manuscript?" "Yes." Thomas turned to face her. "He's a progressive thinker. The kind who believes women's stories deserve to be told by women." "But Denver is so far," Nora said, though excitement was building inside her. "And I've never submitted to a real publisher before. I could help you prepare it. And I'll be traveling to Denver next month. I could deliver it personally, ensure it gets into the right hands." Nora stared at him, speechless. This man she barely knew was offering to champion her work when most of the town thought it was dangerous nonsense. "Why would you do this for me?" she finally asked. Thomas stepped closer. "Because talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away in Ordway. Because stories like yours need to be told." His voice softened. "And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I saw you standing up to Hargrove." The confession hung between them, as tangible as the evening air. "I hardly know you," Nora whispered, though something deep inside her felt as though she'd known him forever. "Then get to know me," he said simply, "while we prepare your manuscript. And if, after that, you still feel we're strangers, I'll deliver your work to Denver and ask nothing more." His proposal was as unexpected as it was tempting. A chance to pursue her dream with the help of someone who believed in her work, someone who looked at her with respect rather than concern or disapproval. "All right," she agreed, "but I won't let you do all this without compensation. I can help with bookkeeping or correspondence for your ranch." Thomas smiled. "If you insist, though having the pleasure of your company would be compensation enough." As they continued their walk, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in years, Nora felt the stirring of possibility not just for her writing, but for something she had never expected to find in Ordway. Over the following weeks, Thomas became a fixture in Nora's life. They would meet in the afternoons, sometimes at her home under her father's watchful but approving eye, sometimes at the small gazebo in the town square, where they would work on her manuscript together. Thomas's suggestions were always insightful, never attempting to change her vision but rather to sharpen it. He challenged her when necessary and praised her when deserved. And with each passing day, Nora found herself looking forward to their meetings for reasons that had less and less to do with her manuscript. On a particularly warm afternoon, they sat in the gazebo, papers spread between them. Thomas was explaining a note he'd made about pacing in Chapter 7 when Nora noticed Mrs. Henderson and her daughter Louisa staring at them from across the square, whispering behind gloved hands. "We're causing a scandal," she said, nodding discreetly toward the women. Thomas followed her gaze and frowned. "Because we're working together on your manuscript. Because an unmarried woman and man are spending time together unchaperoned," Nora corrected. "And because that woman happens to be me, already known for my inappropriate interests." "Is your reputation in danger?" Thomas asked seriously. "I would never want to cause you harm." "My reputation was in danger the moment I wrote a story about a female doctor," Nora said with a wry smile. "But thank you for your concern. Still, perhaps we should be more mindful of appearances." He gathered the papers. "Would you allow me to speak with your father, to make my intentions clear?" Nora's heart stuttered. "Your intentions?" Thomas met her gaze steadily. "To court you properly, Nora, if that would be welcome." The world seemed to still around them. Nora had never given much thought to courtship, had, in fact, assumed her unconventional ideas had made her unmarriageable in Ordway. Yet here was this man, looking at her with such earnestness, such genuine affection. "It would be very welcome," she said softly. That evening, Thomas called formally at the Newman home. Samuel Newman, initially wary of the rancher's interest in his daughter, was won over by Thomas's direct manner and obvious respect for Nora's writing. "So you believe her stories should be published?" Samuel asked as they sat in the small parlor. "I do," Thomas affirmed. "Nora has a gift for storytelling and important things to say. The world would be poorer without her voice." Samuel studied the younger man. "And what of your ranch, your future? Would there be room in it for a wife with literary ambitions?" "Sir, I would consider myself fortunate to build a future with someone as passionate and talented as your daughter," Thomas replied without hesitation. I didn't come west to recreate the limitations of the world I left behind. I came to build something new. Later, when Thomas had gone and Nora was helping her father prepare for bed, Samuel took her hand. "He's a good man, your Thomas," he said. "Not like the others in this town." "He's not my Thomas, Papa," she corrected gently. Samuel smiled knowingly. "Not yet, perhaps, but I see the way he looks at you and the way you look at him when you think no one's watching." Nora felt her cheeks warm. "He supports my writing." "He supports you," her father corrected. "There's a difference. Don't be afraid of happiness, Nora. Your mother wouldn't want that." As the days passed, Thomas and Nora settled into a routine. Mornings were for her household duties and his ranch work. Afternoons were for editing her manuscript. Evenings were for courtship walks through town, picnics by the creek, conversations that stretched long into the twilight. They learned each other's stories. Thomas spoke of his parents' deaths within months of each other, of his decision to sell their Pennsylvania home and start fresh where land was available and affordable. Nora shared memories of her mother, her childhood dreams of becoming a writer, and her frustration with Ordway's limitations. "Have you ever considered leaving?" Thomas asked one evening as they sat on the Newmans' front porch. "Finding a place where your ideas wouldn't seem so radical." "Every day," Nora admitted. "But my father's health isn't what it was, and this is the only home I've known. Besides, where would I go, a woman alone?" "You wouldn't have to be alone," Thomas said quietly. Nora studied his profile in the fading light. "What are you saying?" He turned to face her. "I'm saying that I love you, Nora Newman. I love your mind, your spirit, your determination. And I'm saying that perhaps we could find a place together where both our dreams have room to grow." "Thomas." Her voice faltered. "You don't have to answer now," he assured her. "I know we've only known each other a short time, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Warren, coming to check on her father's persistent cough. The moment passed, but Thomas's declaration lingered in Nora's heart like a seed taking root. The following week, as they finalized preparations for Thomas's journey to Denver, tension grew in Ordway. Rumors had spread about Nora's manuscript and its controversial subject matter. Mrs. Henderson had taken it upon herself to warn the town about the dangerous influence of women with unnatural ambitions, clearly referring to Nora without naming her. When Nora entered Jennings' general store for supplies, conversation stopped abruptly. Mrs. Jennings, normally friendly, was cool as she filled Nora's order. "Is something wrong, Mrs. Jennings?" Nora finally asked. The older woman pressed her lips together. "I've always been fond of you, Nora, but this business about women doctors and such, it's causing talk. And you're carrying on with Mr. Griffith so publicly." She shook her head. "It's not proper. Carrying on," Nora repeated, stung. "We're courting with my father's blessing, even so." Mrs. Jennings lowered her voice. "People are saying he's filling your head with even more nonsense about publishing your stories, that he's leading you astray." Anger flared in Nora's chest. "Thomas believes in my writing. That's hardly leading me astray. A woman's place is in the home, dear. Not having her name in newspapers and books for all to see. It's unbecoming." Nora paid for her purchases with shaking hands. Outside, she nearly collided with Reverend Porter. "Miss Newman," he greeted her, his usual warmth noticeably absent. "I was hoping to speak with you. Several members of the congregation have expressed concerns about your literary pursuits. My stories harm no one, Reverend, but they may harm you, child." His face took on a look of practiced concern. "And Mr. Griffith's encouragement of these pursuits, it raises questions about his judgment and his intentions toward you." "His intentions are honorable," Nora said firmly, "and my writing is my own choice." The Reverend sighed. "I've known you since you were a little girl, Nora. I baptized you. I only want what's best for you. Perhaps you might consider writing more appropriate tales that uplift women in their proper spheres rather than confusing them." Nora clutched her purchases tighter. "I write the truth as I see it, Reverend. And in truth, women's proper spheres are as vast as men's. That kind of thinking leads to unhappiness, my dear." He shook his head sadly. "I'll pray for you and for Mr. Griffith to come to his senses." By the time Thomas came to call that evening, Nora was fuming. She recounted her encounters with Mrs. Jennings and Reverend Porter as they sat in the parlor under Samuel's distracted supervision. "It's infuriating," she concluded. "They speak as if I'm a child being led astray rather than a grown woman with my own mind." Thomas's expression darkened. "I've experienced similar resistance. Hargrove refused to order books I requested because they were unsuitable for Ordway's moral climate. And yesterday, Henderson suggested that I should be careful about yoking myself to a woman with notions." "This town," Nora groaned. "Sometimes I think it will never change." "Perhaps it won't," Thomas said carefully. "At least not in our lifetime." Something in his tone made Nora look at him closely. "What are you suggesting?" "Come with me to Denver," he said, leaning forward. "Not just to deliver your manuscript, but to see if it might be a place where both our futures could unfold. Leave Ordway." The idea both terrified and exhilarated her. "Just to visit," he clarified, "to explore the possibility. Denver has newspapers, publishing houses, a growing cultural community, and it's close enough to return if—" He hesitated. "If you find it's not what you want." "And if it is what I want," Thomas took her hand, "then we could build a life there together." Nora glanced at her father, who had nodded off in his chair. "I can't leave Papa. He could come with us," Thomas suggested. "Denver has better medical care. That cough of his, it would be treated properly there." The possibility unfurled before her a life beyond Ordway's stifling boundaries, a chance to pursue her writing without constant judgment, a future with this man who saw her dreams as valuable rather than dangerous. "I'll need to think about it," she said. "And speak with Papa." Thomas nodded. "Of course, I would never rush you into such a decision." He squeezed her hand. "But know this, Nora, wherever you decide to plant your dreams, I want to be the ground that supports them." That night, after Thomas had gone, Nora sat at her father's bedside. His cough had worsened despite Dr. Warren's treatments, and concern gnawed at her. "Papa," she began hesitantly, "what would you think about visiting Denver? Thomas says the doctors there might help with your cough." Samuel studied her face. "This isn't about my cough, is it?" Nora sighed. "Not entirely. Thomas has suggested we might find a more welcoming community there for his ranching ambitions and my writing. And for your relationship," her father added perceptively. "Yes," she admitted. "People here are talking, Papa. They think Thomas is corrupting me with dangerous ideas when in truth, I've had these ideas all along." Samuel took her hand. "I know this town has been hard on you, Nora. I've watched you shrink yourself to fit within its boundaries, and it breaks my heart. Then you wouldn't mind leaving." He was quiet for a moment. "I would mind leaving the place where your mother rests. I would mind leaving the home we built together." His eyes grew distant. "But I would mind far more watching you sacrifice your happiness to stay." "You're not well, Papa," Nora protested. "Moving could be difficult." "I'm sick, not dying," he said firmly. "And Thomas is right, Denver would have better doctors." He squeezed her hand. "I always promised your mother I would support your dreams wherever they led you. I won't break that promise now." Tears filled Nora's eyes. "I love you, Papa. And I love you, my brilliant girl." He smiled tiredly. "Tell Thomas I said yes." The next day, Nora met Thomas at the gazebo, ignoring the now familiar stares and whispers. Papa agrees, she told him without preamble. He'll come with us to Denver. Joy lit Thomas's face. Truly, you'll come to visit, she emphasized, to explore possibilities. She took a deep breath. And to see if what's growing between us can flourish somewhere with more sunlight and less judgment. Thomas took her hands in his, oblivious to the scandalized looks from passers-by. Nora, you've made me happier than I can express. There's something else, she said, suddenly nervous. I've been thinking about what you said about loving me. She met his gaze steadily. I love you too, Thomas. Your kindness, your respect, your belief in possibilities, I'd almost stopped believing in myself. He lifted her hand to his lips. Then let's find those possibilities together. News of their planned departure spread through Ordway like wildfire. Some, like young Mary from the telegram office, visited to wish them well. Others, like Reverend Porter and Mrs. Henderson, made a point of expressing their disapproval, thinly veiled as concern. Denver is no place for a respectable, unmarried woman, Mrs. Henderson told Nora when they encountered each other outside the church. The temptations, the loose morals. I fear for your reputation, dear. I appreciate your concern, Nora replied evenly, but I'll be traveling with my father and Mr. Griffith. My reputation will survive. Will it, Mrs. Henderson raised an eyebrow. A long journey with a man who encourages your unconventional pursuits. People will talk. Nora had reached the limit of her patience. People already talk, Mrs. Henderson. They talk when I write stories about women doctors. They talk when I spend time with a man who respects my mind. They talk when I dare to dream beyond this town's narrow vision. She straightened her shoulders. Let them talk. I'll be too busy living to listen. The week before their departure was a flurry of activity. Thomas helped Samuel arrange for the rental of their home during their absence, while Nora carefully packed her manuscripts and the few precious books she couldn't bear to leave behind. The evening before they were to leave, Thomas invited them to dinner at his ranch, a modest but well-maintained property on the outskirts of town. He had prepared the meal himself, simple but delicious, and as they ate, he shared his vision for the future. I've written to a friend in Denver who knows of several promising properties outside the city, he told them. Land with good water access, suitable for the kind of progressive ranching methods I want to implement. His eyes met Nora's across the table. And close enough to the city for a writer to maintain connections with publishers and other literary minds. It sounds wonderful, Nora said softly. It could be, Thomas agreed, if it's what you want. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask. Samuel cleared his throat. Perhaps I should check on the horses, he suggested. Rising with a knowing smile when they were alone, Thomas came to kneel beside Nora's chair. I had planned to wait until we reached Denver to give you time to be sure, but I find I can't wait another day. He opened the box to reveal a ring not ostentatious but beautifully crafted, with a modest diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires. Nora Newman, you've changed my life. You've shown me that love doesn't mean asking someone to be less so you can be more, it means growing together toward the sun. His voice was steady but full of emotion. Will you marry me? Not to become someone different, but to become more fully yourself, with me at your side. Tears blurred Nora's vision as she looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was making. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Thomas. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her, a gentle, reverent kiss that held all the promise of their future. When Samuel returned, he found them standing by the fireplace, Nora's head resting on Thomas's shoulder, their hands intertwined. I take it she said yes. He asked, smiling broadly despite the cough that still troubled him. She did, Thomas confirmed, his face alight with happiness. Samuel embraced them both. Your mother would be so proud, he told Nora. Not because you're getting married, but because you're marrying someone who sees you for exactly who you are. The journey to Denver took 3 days by stagecoach, 3 days of dust and discomfort, but also of mounting excitement as the landscape changed, and the possibilities ahead seemed to expand with every mile. Denver in 1878 was a city in transformation, no longer just a mining camp, but not yet the sophisticated metropolis it would become. Still, to Nora, who had known only Ordway's single main street and handful of businesses, it was a revelation. "Look, Papa," she exclaimed as they rode into the city. Bookshops, 3 of them just on this street. Her eyes widened at the sight of a building with a sign proclaiming Denver Women's Literary Society. Thomas grinned at her enthusiasm. "Wait until you see the newspaper offices. The Denver Post is just getting established, but it's already making waves." They stayed at a respectable hotel near the center of town. The following morning, while Samuel rested, Thomas took Nora to meet his friend at the newspaper. James Holloway was a brisk, energetic man with ink-stained fingers and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He welcomed them warmly, particularly when Thomas explained the purpose of their visit. "So you're the writer Thomas has been telling me about," he said, shaking Nora's hand with none of the condescension she was accustomed to receiving from professional men. "I've been looking forward to reading your work." "You have?" Nora couldn't hide her surprise. "Indeed." James gestured for them to sit. Thomas's letter mentioned a story about a female physician facing prejudice in a frontier town. It's exactly the kind of material our readers respond to, particularly our growing female readership. He accepted the manuscript Nora handed him. "I'll read this right away. If it's as good as Thomas claims, we could begin serialization next month." "Next month?" Nora gasped. "So quickly," James smiled. "The publishing world moves faster here than in the East. We have to keep up with the pace of change in the West." He studied her thoughtfully. "Are you planning to stay in Denver? I'm always looking for fresh voices for our features section." "We're exploring the possibility," Thomas answered, glancing at Nora. "Well, explore it seriously," James advised. "Denver needs writers who understand the West but bring fresh perspectives to it." He tapped the manuscript. "I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow." As they left the newspaper office, Nora was practically floating. "He didn't dismiss me," she marveled. He didn't even seem surprised that a woman had written about a female doctor. "Denver isn't Ordway," Thomas reminded her, taking her hand as they walked along the bustling street. "Here, women's ambitions aren't seen as threats but as contributions." They spent the day exploring the city, visiting bookshops where Nora found volumes she'd only read about, touring neighborhoods where families of different backgrounds lived side by side, and finally, visiting a doctor recommended by James for Samuel's persistent cough. Dr. Elizabeth Miller was not what Nora had expected. A woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense manner and a Boston accent, she examined Samuel thoroughly before delivering her assessment. "Bronchitis, most likely," she told them. "Not tuberculosis, thank goodness, but still requiring proper treatment." She wrote out a prescription. "Follow this regimen strictly, Mr. Newman, and we should see improvement within weeks." As she showed them out, she noticed Nora staring at her medical diploma. "Are you interested in medicine, Miss Newman?" "Not as a practitioner," Nora admitted. "But I've written a story about a female doctor in the West." "Have you?" Interest sparked in Dr. Miller's eyes. "I'd very much like to read it. The struggles I faced establishing my practice here would make quite a tale." "You established your practice alone?" Thomas asked. Dr. Miller nodded. "5 years ago. It wasn't easy, but Denver has proven more accepting than most places. There are now 3 of us female physicians that is serving this community. As they left, Nora's mind was racing with possibilities. Did you hear that? 3 female doctors practicing openly, respected by the community. In Ordway, they act as though I'm suggesting something from a fairy tale. Thomas squeezed her hand. And did you notice how many women were working in those shops we visited? Or the school we passed with a female principal's name on the sign? That evening, over dinner in the hotel's dining room, they discussed what they had seen and learned. "The doctor seems confident she can help with your cough, Papa," Nora said. "And the prescription isn't even very expensive." Samuel nodded. She was impressive, knew her business without any fuss or pretension. He looked between Nora and Thomas. "And this James fellow, he truly thinks your writing has merit." "He does," Thomas confirmed. "He's going to let us know tomorrow, but he seemed genuinely enthusiastic." "And the properties you mentioned?" Samuel asked. "Have you had a chance to inquire about them?" Thomas nodded. "We're riding out to see 2 of them the day after tomorrow. Both have good water rights and quality grazing land, and both are within an hour's ride of the city." Nora found herself imagining a life here, mornings spent writing, perhaps even working for James's newspaper, afternoons helping Thomas with ranch correspondence, evenings among people who valued ideas and ambition regardless of gender. A place where their children, if they were blessed with them, could grow up seeing possibilities rather than limitations. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. "It's all happening so quickly," she murmured. Thomas covered her hand with his. "Too quickly." "No," she decided after a moment. "Not too quickly, just momentously." Samuel watched them with knowing eyes. "Life's biggest decisions often feel that way," he said. "Your mother and I decided to marry after knowing each other just 6 weeks. My parents were scandalized." He smiled at the memory. "But when something's right, you know it in your bones." The following morning, a message arrived from James Holloway asking them to visit his office at their earliest convenience. They found him at his desk, Nora's manuscript open before him, pages covered in editing marks. "It's excellent," he said without preamble. "Raw in places, certainly, but with a voice and perspective I haven't encountered before. The scene where Dr. Emily confronts the town council," he shook his head admiringly. "Powerful stuff. You want to publish it?" Nora could hardly believe it. "I do. As a serial to start, with potential for book publication if reader response is strong, which I believe it will be." He named a figure for payment that made Nora's eyes widen. "And I'd like to offer you a position as a contributor, writing about women's experiences in the West. Not fiction, but essays, interviews, reports." "A real job," Nora whispered. "As a writer," James nodded. 2 pieces a month to start with your byline. Nora Newman, staff contributor." The words seemed to hang in the air like a dream made tangible. Nora looked at Thomas, whose face shone with pride and joy. "This is what you've worked for," he said softly. "What you deserve." She turned back to James. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes to all of it." As they left the newspaper office, Nora felt as though she were walking above the ground rather than on it. "I can hardly believe this is happening," she said, squeezing Thomas's hand. "A real writing position, my story in print, people reading my words." "Believing in your words," Thomas added. "Being changed by them." They spent the afternoon in a daze of happiness, exploring more of Denver and making plans. By the time they returned to the hotel to share the news with Samuel, Nora had made her decision. "I want to stay, Papa," she told him. "I want to build a life here with Thomas. A life where I can write and he can ranch and our children can grow up believing they can be anything." Samuel embraced her. "Then that's what we'll do," he said simply. This old man still has a few adventures left in him. The following day, Thomas took them to see the properties he had mentioned. The second one captured their hearts immediately, a sprawling piece of land with a modest but sound house, a creek running through good pasture, and views of the distant mountains. "I can see us here," Nora said, standing on what would be their porch. "I can see children running in that meadow, horses in those fields." She turned to Thomas. "I can see our future, so can I." He wrapped his arms around her. "Our dreams growing together." They made an offer that day. By the time they returned to Ordway a week later to collect their belongings and finalize arrangements, word had spread of Nora's publishing success and their engagement. The reactions were mixed. Some, like young Mary and the Jennings' son Robert, expressed genuine happiness for them. Others, predictably, were less supportive. "So you're abandoning Ordway for the big city," Mrs. Henderson sniffed when she encountered Nora outside the general store. "I suppose we're not sophisticated enough for you anymore." "It's not about sophistication," Nora replied calmly. "It's about finding a place where both Thomas and I can pursue our callings. Writing stories about women doing men's jobs is hardly a calling," Mrs. Henderson said with a dismissive wave. "It's a fancy that will pass once you have children to care for." Nora smiled, refusing to be baited. "Perhaps, or perhaps I'll discover, as many women have, that the mind can nurture both children and ideas." She nodded politely. "Good day, Mrs. Henderson. I wish you well." As she walked away, Thomas appeared at her side, saying your goodbyes. "Such as they are," Nora sighed. "I'll miss some things about Ordway, but not the constant judgment." "One more stop before we finish packing," Thomas said, steering her toward Hargrove's bookshop. "Thomas, I don't think—" "Trust me," he said with a mysterious smile. Inside the bookshop, Mr. Hargrove was helping a customer. When he saw them, his expression soured slightly. "Miss Newman, Mr. Griffith, I hear you're leaving us for Denver's more liberal atmosphere." "We are," Thomas confirmed. "But before we go, I thought you might be interested in this." He handed Hargrove a copy of the Denver Post, folded open to an announcement about upcoming features. Hargrove read aloud. "Coming next month, Beyond Boundaries by Nora Newman, a serialized tale of courage and conviction in the American West." He looked up, surprise evident on his face. "They're publishing your story." "They are," Nora confirmed, "and they've hired me as a contributor." Hargrove handed the newspaper back. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order, unexpected as this development is." "Thank you," Nora said sincerely. "And I hope you'll consider stocking the book, should it be published in that format, for all the other young women in Ordway with dreams that might seem too big." Something shifted in Hargrove's expression, not quite approval, but perhaps a grudging respect. "I'll consider it," he said. "The market will determine its success or failure, as with all things." As they left the bookshop, Thomas chuckled. "That's as close to a blessing as Hargrove gives anyone." Nora laughed. "I'll take it." They were married 2 weeks later in Denver, in a small but joyful ceremony attended by Samuel, James Holloway and his wife, Dr. Miller, and a few new friends they had already made. Nora wore a simple gown of ivory silk with sapphires at her throat that matched her ring and her eyes. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas whispered, "And so our adventure truly begins." "It began the day you walked into Hargrove's shop," Nora whispered back, "when you saw value in what everyone else saw as a problem." Their new home quickly became a haven. Thomas threw himself into implementing the progressive ranching methods he had studied, while Nora divided her time between writing for the newspaper and working on new stories. Samuel's health improved under Dr. Miller's care, and he found purpose helping with the ranch accounts and befriending their neighbors. 6 months after they settled in Denver, Nora received a letter from Mary in Ordway. Dear Mrs. Griffith, though I still think of you as Miss Newman, you'll never believe what's happening here. Your story in the Denver Post has caused quite a stir. Mr. Hargrove ordered copies of the paper after the first installment was published, and they sell out every week. Even Mrs. Henderson was seen reading it, though she claims it's only to identify its moral failings. But the most exciting news is that Sarah Miller, no relation to your Dr. Miller, I assume, has announced her intention to apply to medical school back east. She says your Dr. Emily inspired her to pursue the dream she's always had, but never voiced. Her parents are scandalized, of course, but her father has reluctantly agreed to consider it. Perhaps Ordway is changing after all, thanks to you. Your dreams were too big for this town once, but now they're helping others dream bigger too. With affection, Mary. Nora read the letter to Thomas that evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. You've changed lives, he said proudly, just as I knew you would. We've changed lives, she corrected, leaning against his shoulder. I would never have found the courage without you. Thomas kissed her forehead. You had the courage all along, Nora. You just needed someone to say, let's go somewhere dreams can grow. She placed his hand on her belly, where the first subtle signs of their child had begun to make themselves known. And now we're growing more than dreams. His eyes widened. Are you certain? Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday, Nora said, joy bubbling through her words. In about 7 months, there will be another Griffith in this house. Thomas gathered her in his arms, laughing and crying all at once. A child, he marveled. Our child. A child who will grow up knowing that dreams matter, Nora said softly. That being true to yourself matters. That love means supporting each other's journeys, not constraining them. Just like their mother taught me, Thomas said, kissing her with all the love in his heart. As darkness fell around them, they remained on the porch, talking of the future of the ranch, of Nora's writing, of the child who would join them in the spring, of all the possibilities that lay ahead in this place where their dreams had room to flourish. And in that moment, under the vast Colorado sky, Nora knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home not in a place, but in the love of a man who had looked at her dreams and seen not something to fear or constrain, but something to nurture and celebrate. Their journey had only just begun, but already it had taken them further than either could have imagined that day in Hargrove's bookshop when a cowboy had dared to challenge a small town's small mind, and a woman with big dreams had found the courage to pursue them. In the years that followed, Nora's writing career flourished. Beyond Boundaries was published as a novel and sold well enough that her publisher requested 2 more books. Her newspaper pieces about women's experiences in the West gained national attention, particularly a series on female homesteaders that was reprinted in Eastern publications. Thomas's ranch prospered under his forward-thinking management. His methods of sustainable grazing and water conservation were initially met with skepticism by neighboring ranchers, but gradually gained respect as their effectiveness became apparent. He was eventually asked to speak at agricultural conferences about his innovative approaches. Their first child, a son they named William Samuel after both their fathers, was born on a spring morning in 1879, with Dr. Miller attending the birth. He had Thomas's gray eyes and Nora's determined spirit, evident from his first lusty cries. Samuel doted on his grandson, regaining strength as he found new purpose in teaching the boy about the natural world. His cough, while never completely disappearing, became manageable under Dr. Miller's care, allowing him to enjoy an active role in their family life. 2 years later, their daughter Elizabeth joined the family, a quiet, observant child with her father's gentle nature and her mother's love of stories. By the time she was 4, she was dictating tales for Nora to write down, insisting they be published by fastening the pages together with ribbon. Their home became known as a place of welcome and intellectual exchange. James Holloway and his wife were frequent visitors, as were other writers, artists, and progressive thinkers drawn to Denver's growing cultural scene. They hosted literary salons where ideas flowed as freely as conversation, and where women's voices were valued equally with men's. Occasionally, news would reach them from Ordway. Mary wrote that Sarah Miller had indeed gone east to medical school and returned to establish a practice in a town 50 miles from Ordway, close enough to occasionally treat patients from her hometown, including, ironically, Mrs. Henderson, who had developed a mysterious ailment that only a female doctor could properly address. Mr. Hargrove, true to his word, had stocked Nora's books once they were published. According to Mary, he claimed it was purely a business decision based on customer demand. But she had seen him recommending Beyond Boundaries to a shy young woman who reminded her very much of Nora. On a summer evening 10 years after they had left Ordway, as they celebrated their anniversary with friends and family gathered in the garden of their expanded home, Thomas raised his glass. "To Nora," he said, his eyes finding hers across the table, "whose dreams taught me to dream bigger. And to all those whose dreams bring us here tonight, may they continue to grow and flourish." Later, when the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Thomas and Nora walked hand in hand under the stars, as had become their custom. "You ever regret it?" Thomas asked. "Leaving Ordway? Choosing this life with me?" Nora stopped and turned to face him, moonlight silvering her features. "Not for a single moment," she said. "How could I regret choosing love and possibility over fear and constraint?" Thomas traced her cheek with gentle fingers. "Sometimes I still can't believe my fortune that I walked into that bookshop on exactly the right day, at exactly the right moment." "I think we would have found each other eventually," Nora said. "Some things are meant to be." "Like a woman with dreams too big for small-town minds," Thomas murmured, "and a cowboy who knew just where those dreams could grow." "Exactly like that," Nora agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him under the vast Colorado sky, the same sky that had witnessed their journey from constraint to freedom, from judgment to acceptance, from separate paths to a shared journey of love and purpose. And as they walked back toward the home they had built together, Nora thought of all the words she had written and all the words yet to come, stories of courage and conviction, of love and possibility, of dreams that refused to be diminished by small minds and instead found soil rich enough to flourish and grow. In that moment, surrounded by the life they had created together, Nora knew that the greatest story of all was the one she and Thomas were writing every day, not with ink on paper, but with love and courage and the unshakable belief that dreams matter, that they deserve room to grow, and that sometimes the most important journey is the one that leads you to someone who sees your true self and says simply, "Let's go."